Golden May.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to the Holden Made Podcast. I'm Jeremy Holden, your host for the Holden Made Podcast. This is a podcast about creativity, about creative processes, and anything else that piques my interest. I look forward to interviewing people about their careers, about their creativity, and about their lives in general. For this episode of the Holden Made Podcast, I want you to welcome Anthony Mejia, a good friend and a great designer in his own right. Let's dive right in and find out what he's up to. Well, hello, Anthony. Thank you so much for joining us today. Everybody who's watching and listening to this is my friend Anthony Mejia. And I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what you do for a living, just as a start off, and say thank you so much for joining us for this interview, this podcast, this video, all of the different media that this will end up in.
Awesome. No, well, hey Jeremy. It's nice to see you again. Yeah, I'm Anthony Mejia. I think you asked me to what I'm currently doing, right?
Yes.
So yeah, currently I'm a senior brand and design manager at Fanatics, as well as running my own design studio. So those two things I juggle.
Oh, that's absolutely amazing, man. Absolutely wonderful. By all means, what does that mean for you to be working with Fanatics? Because you've been with them on and off for a while now, correct?
Yeah, so I had my first kind of go with them from 2014 to 2019. And then I stepped away to pursue another opportunity in Portland. And then I recently came back in 2022. So it's been going on, yeah, 2 years. 2 years that I'm back. So total of 7 years, five at the front and two right now. So
That's pretty incredible. That's pretty incredible. My
yeah.
question to you next is you have evolved with them then. You have grown with that company from the time that we went to college together.
Yeah.
You've grown with them and moved into different positions. Could you maybe tell us a little bit about what positions you've held with Fanatics?
Sure. Yeah. So my first position back in 2014 was just I was graphic designer, and I was working on t-shirt graphics specifically for what they call hot markets, which is like anything event specific. So we literally made t-shirts from everything from like the SEC equestrian champs all the way up to the Super Bowl and everything in between. So it was a lot of event kind of celebratory type of graphic. I wrote the champions in a lot of different fonts, and I did that for a couple of years. And then there was an opportunity to, as you mentioned, Fanatics kind of grown with them. So as Fanatics grew, different teams and different opportunities began to kind of pop up just by way of the company growing. So one was brand marketing, and it was a one-man show at the time over in San Francisco, with a guy named Mark Liu, who I work with now, actually again. So that's his nice full circle moment. But he kind of was kind of doing it all on his own. I met him at a design kind of conference within Fanatics, and we kind of hit it off. And I was able to kind of move over to his team and be the first one on that team, led by him, which was more like brand marketing. So that then opened the door to a wide range of various like design avenues, right? Everything from designing trade show booths to um, digital marketing for social media to photo shoot campaigns for, to launch specific collections. And so that's kind of where, yeah, I kind of, it was kind of like I was at a creative buffet, get to do a lot of different creative things.
That's incredible, Anthony. That's great. And just the beginning here, we went to college together. We knew each other kind of way back before you started all of this. I've known that you've been interested in design and type for a very long time, and we'll back into your career in a moment, but I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper. And I want to ask about your past, if you don't mind. Kind of just talk about where you came from, where you grew up, what your family was like, and what your first kind of dive into the creative realm was, whether it was fine art, whether it was design. Uh, Maybe you can tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'm first generation American, Mexican American. Both my parents are from Mexico. grew up in Fontana, California. Met you at Cal State San Bernardino. Yeah, we just I guess I always had a love and appreciation for art. I never really saw it as a career as a kid. It was always I saw it more as a hobby. I was always interested in drawing. I love, start off coloring books and then, moved on to trying to copy the coloring book in terms of like drawing what was in the coloring book and then coloring it. And yeah, I was always like really drawn to just creating, drawing, just building blocks, things like that. And but again, I never really saw it as a career. So then as I grew and I started to think about what I wanted to do, what I did see as a career was that was somewhat creative, was like engineering. And so that's kind of like what I was really into, kind of into high school, and what I really wanted to do, I guess, was engineering. I want to do like mechanical or aerospace engineering. And then I got to calculus and I realized that it wasn't going to be as easy or as enjoyable as I thought. And so I kind of find myself at this point where I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Um, yeah, I honestly, like, I had no idea, but I always was drawn to art. In high school, I loved ceramics. I loved like art painting class, but then I also liked, we had a AutoCAD class. So my school that I went to, Fontana High, we had a lot of trades as electives. Probably because they knew that a lot of kids from that school weren't going to go to college. We had like welding, auto shop. We had a machine shop. We had a AutoCAD class. So I was really into the AutoCAD stuff. So yeah, that's kind of where my, I guess, love for art kind of grew to, and then kind of where it stopped in terms of me thinking that I was able to do it as a career.
Oh wow, yeah. And if it makes you feel any better, I didn't make it past trigonometry or trig back in high
Yeah.
school. I looked at calculus and my brain swelled up and I just couldn't handle it. That's very fascinating and I appreciate that. I remember as well when I was in high school, I took drafting classes. I took good old fashioned, here's how you work with blueprint machines and here's how you draft. And the blueprint machines still use tons of ammonia, made me sick, but I loved the process because it related to what my grandfather did. And this kind of leads me into to the next question. I appreciate that you just mentioned you're a first generation Mexican American in your family. Are you the first person to go to college as well?
So in my immediate family, I'm also an only child. So yeah, I was the first and the last. Um, and in my, I guess, extended family, a few of my cousins went to college. A lot of the younger ones ultimately ended up going to college. One of my cousins actually ended up going to Cal State San Bernardino as well for graphic design, and he's now a designer at Monster Energy. So it's pretty
Oh,
cool.
that's beautiful. Absolutely
Yeah.
wonderful to hear. And what a great achievement. I'm the first person to graduate from a four-year university in my family as well. Many people attended, but we had this situation where my grandfather was a contractor and he was in the trades and he knew more than him about drafting because he worked it for most of his childhood or his teenage years. He went to the Art Institute of Chicago and he went to a couple of semesters at UCLA and USC. Again, just like, back in the day, summer courses that they offered. And he said, "No thanks. I'm already doing this for a living, and this is way too basic." So he was the last person to kind of foray into college. My dad went as a mechanic and got a certificate on being a diesel mechanic, and then he worked in that field for 42 years. So I'm the first one to graduate with a degree. Some people attempted it, and then I have extended family beyond that who have gone to college and gotten their degrees as well. So I feel grateful to have that opportunity, coming from a series of family members who just said, "You know what, this isn't for me. I'm going to move forward." With that being said, I had a lot of
Congrats,
encouragement.
man.
Oh, thank you. I
That's
appreciate it. And congrats to you as well. You've done so much. Uh,
thanks.
and you had family support with this to follow a creative career, go into college. I know that was a big push on my end. My family was supportive of me getting an education.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it was yeah, I had a lot of support, and then it was almost pushed on me. So when I when I graduated high school, my dad basically gave me three options. The first one was, I could move out, start working, and build my own, do my own thing. The second option was I could stay there and get a job, and I'd have to start paying him rent. And then the third one was I could go to college and live there, continue living there at their house for free. So yeah, it was kind of like, yeah, it was obviously the best option was to go to college and stay living there for free when you're 18 years old.
Oh yeah.
Uh, but it's funny because yeah, I at the time I just wanted to start working. I didn't really want to go to school. I had some friends that were already working. They were working at like typical kind of Inland Empire style job, like at a warehouse or fulfillment center. They were like, man, if you get your forklift license, you can make X amount of dollars an hour. And I was like, whoa, like in my mind at the time, I'm like,
Yeah.
that's enough, like hell yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
You don't really see, I guess, the bigger picture. You kind of see the short term versus the long term when you're that age. So my dad really, both my parents, my mom and my dad both really kind of pushed me to go to school, and so I actually just signed up at Chaffee Community College just because, right, just for the free stay at home without really knowing what I wanted to do. So
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, that's an amazing opportunity. I've had friends who've told me those stories, and they took full advantage of it. I know I didn't have that blessing to have my college paid for. I had to work three jobs. As you know, you were there. I had to wait to get through college just due to
yeah,
work incidents. I started college a little bit later, so I relate to what you're saying, and I see that opportunity as a blessing. I
yeah,
personally had to work three jobs while going through college, but it made me stronger. It made me who I am. And nobody, do not do it. Whoever's watching this or listening, do not hold three jobs and do 19 units. Don't do what I did. Do what I say. Don't, yeah, I know it's probably a good example. I've got good work ethic, but there's a certain point where you will burn out and you just don't want to burn out in your 30s. You burnt out in your 20s to going to college.
yeah. Well, to
Um,
clarify, they didn't pay for my college. They just made me go. I had to pay for it.
Very
Yeah,
true. Very true. That is
yeah.
correct. Yes, that is a good clarification. But again, what a wonderful opportunity for them to let you live rent free at their house for X
Yeah.
amount of time while you were pursuing your degree. Um, and I want to kind of back up into the art discussion. Thank you so much for sharing about your family. But uh, I know you love typography as much as I do. I know you just mentioned that you worked on multiple ways of spelling out champions when you first started with Fanatics. When it comes to your creative process, how do you approach something? Let's look at type specifically. How do you work with type in a project? How do you choose to either design something custom or search for something that exists? Feel free to expand on that and share your thoughts.
Yeah. So when it comes, I guess coming speaking on type specifically, yeah, I mean, I think it's super important, right, to a project. It just it could either make or break, in my opinion, like the overall success of a project. You can have the strongest visual identity, but if the type falls flat, then it kind of just looks like, two different projects and not one cohesive um project all the way through. So I'm yeah, like as you mentioned, I'm a big low roof type as you are. And I'd say I don't know, my process is have you seen those TikToks or those Instagrams where it's like uh they show kind of like what the I think it's like what the project looks like in the end, and then like what it takes to get there. And it's just this guy like hitting the down arrow, just going through like 100 different fonts.
Yes, yes, I have. It's kind of funny.
So I mean, I hate to say it, but that's kind of that's kind of my process as well. I guess you could narrow it down at the beginning in terms of if I'm looking for something, the basics, right? If I'm looking for something serif, I'm looking for something sans serif or slab serif or a display font that's maybe a little bit more decorative and not as legible, but maybe it's for a word mark or something. So I kind of get an idea of what I want it to look like. And I guess in my head, I have these categories of, sans serif is a little bit more modern and clean and minimal. And, serif is obviously a little bit more classy looking and elegant. So depending on what mood or what, what the project's calling for, kind of start there. If it's something for like a university or kind of collegiate, maybe it's something a little bit more slab serif and a little bit more chunky, more blocky. I guess I go with just the what uh what I'm trying to convey visually, and then kind of pick a lane and go down. And then I guess it gets even more once you get down the funnel a little bit more in the creative process, you get a little bit more granular in the fact of, well, there's, thousands of sans serif fonts, but maybe for what I'm working on specifically, I need like a very specific type of R. And so then it's like, well, let me go find the family that has this very specific R, right? That maybe has the has the R a little bit more vertical versus maybe I need it a little bit more horizontal, a little bit more extended, a little bit more condensed. Maybe I need glyphs, right? Like maybe I need a bunch of different types of R's depending on, for body copy, for headlines. So yeah, I guess you could really then start to get really specific on fonts the farther you get down in the process. But yeah, I start really wide, I guess, and obviously then start to zero in on the target.
Oh, that's a really awesome. I appreciate you sharing that. And let's say you're working on client work. Nothing, we're not going to talk about personal at the moment, but if you're having to work with a client on a project, how do you start that? How do you get to the midway point, and how do you finish that off? And I know you tend to end up falling in love with your work like I do, or you tend to hate everything about it all the way up until the last moment. And you go, okay, we can live with that. So I know that was you in the past. How do you feel in this process when you start it? Do you start falling in love with it as well? But again, I'm really interested in the process of how you approach a project, talk with a client, and move forward.
Yeah. So at this, I like to, at this point, I've learned that I'm happier with the results, and it's a much more like seamless process when I work with them, right? When it's a group project versus me thinking, well, I'm the expert and this is what it should be, because then it creates friction if there's disagreement. And then, you know, it doesn't matter how much you love it. If they don't love it, then, it's worthless, right? They're not going to
Yeah,
pay for it.
absolutely.
So I've kind of fallen in love in like this like group project stage, and it helps them want to, if you're bidding with, against other designers, it helps them want to go with you when they feel like they're building with you, when they're part of it, when their voice is heard, when their feedback is taken into consideration. So I've really just started with the first step, I guess, is like a discovery call, right? And it's really them doing all the talking. It's not me selling myself, it's me listening, and it's them telling me like, what do they need? What challenges are they facing? How can I help solve, for what it is that they're looking to get solved for whatever problem they have. And so then once I kind of understand, what they need, then that's, I guess, when you kind of roll into step two of the process of presenting three very different visual directions. And this, at this point, I've done zero design, right? I've listened, and then I make basically these one pagers with imagery, with type, with color, with different brand marks, and they all feel very different, right? Each page feels very different. One maybe has like a lot of badging work, some sans serif fonts, some bold colors. The next one might be, very black and white grayscale, um, a different type of font, a different, more modern look and feel, a little bit more aesthetic. And then the third one might be something just really funky, right? Like just something like really just far out that, who knows, they might like it. And then I present that to them, and kind of just show them these VIs, these visual identities, and different visual directions, and see what they're feeling, what they're not feeling, what they're leaning towards. And oftentimes they'll say like, well, I like 1 and 3, like
Yeah.
they don't ever really say like, oh, I love 2, those, or 3 or 1. They're usually like, we really like 1, but we also like this
Hmm.
specific thing about 3. So then now at least you have, you're starting to like zero in on the scope, right, of what it is they like. And then step three is kind of just then starting to throw out some sketches, or I guess depends on the type of work, right? If it's a identity, if it's a website,
Hmm.
whatever it is, you start kind of designing just some real early on sketches or frameworks of things. And then at that point, they start again, they give their feedback. And ultimately, I guess it's rinse and repeat, right? Ultimately, you get to a point where you've built something together with them, and they love it and you love it, and you hand it off and everyone's happy, right? Like I think that's what I found the most success in, is that type of process. Um, yeah.
No, that's absolutely wonderful. Thank you. That's a lot of detail. You covered so many of my personal questions about what you do in that process right there. I'm sure anybody who watches this or listens is going to take away a lot from that. And it kind of leads me back into your career specifically, not your creative process. Um, you personally, what do you believe your talents are now compared to when you were younger? What do you believe? Because you mentioned you loved illustration, you loved drawing when you were younger. What do you believe your strengths are now as a designer, as management, as a creative director, creative manager, etc.?
I'd say now it's more crafting the story or storytelling, like building the narrative, coming up with the overarching kind of creative plot. I think when I was younger, it was about making things look cool, right? Quote unquote. Like
Oh,
as long as it looked cool, then it was fine. Um, but now I think it's more, something might not look cool until you read the reasons behind why certain decisions were made, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh, that's really cool, like that's really freaking cool. So now I'd say it's more about, yeah, craft, like just storytelling, creative storytelling, whether it's for product or brand. I think that's probably my strength now. It's the reasons why something looks the way it looks, or a production is being produced the way it is. Like the all the upfront work, I'd say, is probably, the discovery and just crafting these different stories.
oh, absolutely. I mean, if nothing else, in humanity, we love a good story. We are storytellers. As you know, I have always fancied myself a storyteller, whether it's visually, verbally, or the written word. And that's the strongest point in our kind of tool bag is crafting a strong story. As a designer, if you are not sending a clear message, we're not doing it right. And that's kind of that isn't kind of that is the deviating item for fine art versus graphic design versus other forms of design. Art does not need to have a clear message. It can be interpreted. With graphic design, you've failed if someone's interpreting your message the wrong way. If you're interpreting it three or four different ways in one group of people, we failed the audience if we haven't told that story correctly. And I appreciate you sharing that point of view. And as you can tell, I'm highly grateful that you're here. Again, it's been years since we've talked like this, and I want to dive into a couple of other just small things. Um, Especially when you're talking about projects, is there a project that kind of just sticks in your mind and you still are attached to it, either in a good way or a bad way? Is there something that you love and you're saying, hey, this is still an example of good work that I've done, whether it's old, new, personal, client work? Is there something you can share with us?
A specific project that stuck with me, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Well, there's one actually that I did in college with you. I
Oh,
think it was a George McGinnis's class.
George, I miss that man.
I think it was. That one stuck with me because I'm pretty sure that project is the project that got me the job at Fanatics. So, as coming out of college, right, your entire portfolio is basically schoolwork, right? Maybe it's a freelance project here and there, but for the majority, it's all the projects that we work on in class.
Yep.
And so I got this interview at Fanatics, right? Flew me to Florida, and I get in there, and the creative director pulls up my portfolio site, right, during the interview, and he's like, he just happened to click on this one very specific project, and he's like, well, tell me about this project. And I think that's where like the creative storytelling, like piece just really kicked in, and like I
Yeah.
was able to talk about the work and really like help me land the job. And it was this project where we had to build like an identity for a product or something, and you also had to like pick the product, like what were you making, like you were making a
Yep.
product, you're making a brand, you're making like the whole thing soup to nuts. And so my take was at that time, I don't know if you remember, like Axe and
Oh.
like body sprays were like very popular, like everyone basically just like carried them in their backpacks and used them.
Oh yeah.
And so
Absolutely.
my kind of story was that the kind of the fragrance market at the time was like oversaturated with like body sprays and active, kind of athlete acts and things like that. And so I wanted to make this like super high end cologne or something like that. And I forget the name of it, what I named it, but I made like a custom font for the brand.
Yep.
And it was all based off of like Michelangelo's like sculpting, like art, and like the angles match like David's shoulder. I don't know. It was like this really like Italian inspired um typeface. And then even like the colors, it was like gold and bronze and white. And I designed like the bottles and the labels and like the whole thing. And so I was telling them how I came up with this idea and why, I came up with it, and how I crafted it based on, certain things that I associated with elegance in class, and um, elevated an elevated market. That basically was like they loved it. Like they were like they didn't care about the work, right? The work kind of was just there, and then it spoke for itself. And we everyone looked at it and it was like cool. But I mean, the work wasn't anything groundbreaking, right? The work wasn't anything innovative. It wasn't like I created an iPhone or anything like that.
Yeah.
Um, the work was super basic, but the story behind it, I think, is what really impressed them, and like what really was like. Because after that, they were like, "Cool." Like basically, they didn't say you're hired, but they told me to strongly consider moving to Florida on my flight back to California because they were more than likely going to offer me the job. So yeah, that one really stuck with me just because of that, right? Like I really felt like that one project kind of opened up a huge door for me.
Absolutely, man. And I'm grateful that I was there for that. I know what you're talking about. I remember you posting each letter of that font as you designed it. You put it to social media after
I
you
have it right
designed it
here,
each
actually. It's
day.
it's in my office. It's if I could.
Oh, look at that. A little camera scroll over, and there it is. Oh, that's
Yeah.
wonderful.
I look at
That,
it now. I look at it now, and there's so many things that I'm like, wow, that's really wrong. Like I should like really F that up. But like, the M and the N are bothering me. But hey, at the time, that's what I thought it should look like. And
yeah.
yeah,
It has all of that inspiration. It has that Renaissance fine fine lines from just the chisel marks being perfectly even, and you have that great influence of early Italian design along with that elevated look that you spoke of. I love it. Absolutely love that it's something that you created in college and still sits strongly with you. And I have floating around here somewhere a font I'm very proud of and is printed on wood, and I can't for the life of me see where it went, but it's something that's going up on the wall behind me eventually as well. And we get this certain satisfaction knowing that we saw the project from the beginning to the end. We're telling that clear story, and you ended up with a really great reward and yet another story to share with other people. It started as classwork to a career.
yeah,
That's pretty
yeah,
amazing.
yeah, 100%.
Oh yeah. And when we build off of that, let me ask you, there are people who are still trying to find their path with creativity, with their creative careers. And right now is a really weird time because we see the rise of AI technologies, image generators, we see chat GPTs, and the media just throws this stuff down our throat. And people get questioning their own skills. They start questioning, where in the world am I going to go with my creativity and what kind of job I should follow. Honestly, what would you share with somebody now at the time of this recording? It's 2024. Where would you they should go creatively? Should they continue to follow their dreams? Do you think there is a certain path that they need to go through, or do you think it's everybody's journey is completely different and nothing you say is going to help them? But do you have any advice for those who are still trying to find their way and maybe become a designer, an animator, an illustrator, whatever it might be? Is there anything you can share with them?
Yeah, no, I think it's, just follow your passion. And my mom used to tell me, if you do what you love, you won't work a day in your life. And I used to kind of laugh at her. I used to think that quote was dumb. But now it's super relevant, right? Like I honestly don't feel like I go to work, right? I love what I do. I'll work on the weekends if I have to, right? Quote unquote work, but it doesn't feel like work because it's something that I want to do. And I would say, yeah, like don't don't let like AI scare people away from, I don't know if you've seen, a lot of the AI, like it looks bad, right? Everyone knows
Yeah,
that it's AI. I mean, I think Coca-Cola just did an entire commercial using AI, and the comments on it, like on the internet that I've seen, I've all like, get this AI crap out of here. It looks so bad. Like, at least in the short term, until they figure out how to make it equally as good as a real life production, I
yeah,
don't I don't see it really being a threat. And I think actually I see it being a tool, right? I think, like, for example, if the agency or agencies, I think there was a few that did this AI commercial for Coke, would have used that to pitch them versus, like, like, hey, this is what we're thinking, almost like a mood board, or a visual direction of like, this is the vibe that we're going for, this is the overall look and feel and the story that we're looking to tell. And then Coke's like, cool, and then go make it, right? But use
yeah.
that as like the template or the sales pitch, right? I think there's ways to leverage AI, right? Like I love ChatGPT. I'm not the best copywriter, so I use
Mm.
ChatGPT all the time. I don't copy it like word for word, but I use it as a starting point, right? If I need a short one couple sentences to talk about something, ChatGPT to write it, and then I'll build off of that, right? But I think there's ways to leverage AI 100% to to kind of streamline your work, and kind of not have to do so much work at the front, and
Yeah,
just
yeah.
use it more as a starting point, right? I actually, fun story with ChatGPT. I had a client come to me that needed like a brand identity, and they also didn't have a name for their brand yet. And I literally took like wrote a prompt in ChatGPT to give me brand names for this specific brand, and it shot out like 20 brand names. I copied the first 10 that I liked. I sent it over to the client. They ended up picking one, and then we went off of that. Like I built the whole brand off of a name that came out of ChatGPT. So
Oh, wow.
that
That's
would have taken me a week to sit there and think of 20 names for this company. Could have, maybe not a week. It would have taken me a few days, right, to sit
yeah.
there and really think of these names, and I literally got it done in, I don't know, 10 seconds. So
Yeah, and I appreciate you sharing that viewpoint, especially using it as a tool, because that's what it's meant to be, is a tool. And my whole vision on this, you know how hands-on I am. I love everything being handmade and then refined digitally. So my use of anything AI is purely for educational purposes, as in I'm learning that it exists and I'm learning how it works. I do not use it in my field yet. There are still a lot of questions for me personally because I believe in that old school way of doing things. I believe in traditional methods mixed with modern technology. So
yeah,
everything starts by hand with me first, and I'm still hesitant to use it in my everyday work. But as you said, using it as an inspiration point, which leads me into one of my big questions. One of the big reasons I'm doing this entire video series with creatives. How do you find inspiration? How do you get to that point where you're inspired to create? How do you get to that point where you're inspired to come up with a design? And you just mentioned, well, shoot, I had limited time, and you used ChatGPT to give you written examples of titles that you could work with, stuff that hopefully didn't exist before, And when you go through the research process, you'll find all of that out. And you ended up going, oh, these 10 are great. We'll do our research, send them to the client, see if the client likes any of them. Client picks it out. That's great. That's part of this inspirational element. If you're making mood boards, it makes sense. If you're making a storyboard, it kind of makes sense to throw your hat into the ring with ChatGPT or with these image generators to move that process along a little bit further, because that always used to be the expensive part in our field, was the idea stage. Uh, the creation process is what is costly. So if you're able to save a little bit of time there, that absolutely makes sense. And I understand where you're coming from there. I'm hopeful with AI tech, just on a personal note, that we will resolve some of the copyright issues that have come up through many of these court cases with the big dogs, between the studios fighting, between Getty Images, Shutterstock, etc., fighting with OpenAI, Stable Diffusion, etc., etc. I'll feel more comfortable once that's all, closed, and everyone feels comfortable with some kind of agreement about copyright. But to get to that inspiration point, it is a valuable tool. Look at Adobe; it's everywhere. The prompt generator, the image generator, it's in the tech already. It's here. It's not going anywhere. It's valuable, and depending on what software you're using, it's already viable.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, another example of how I use it as a tool is sometimes like building a mood board of an image, right? You're looking for a very specific image, right? I remember I was looking for like I needed like three middle-aged males, like, kind of wearing quarter zips, a little bit elevated, sitting around a campfire drinking whiskey. And like, believe it or not, that's like a really hard picture to find sometimes on Google or Pinterest
Yeah,
or any of these. And I like, that was the one image that it was in my mind that I needed that
yeah,
would solidify this mood board and to really sell it and sell the idea of what I was trying to sell. Um, and I couldn't find it. So I prompt threw it in AI. And of course, one guy had like six fingers, but another guy had like a million teeth. So obviously you're not gonna be able to use that image, but it
yeah,
was enough to show, hey, this is what we're actually gonna go do, right? This is an actual scene that we want to go shoot with real humans in a real life photo, real models, real photo production. So I think using it in that way is I'm cool. I don't mind it. I don't think we should be scared of it. And to your point, like, I know legal at every company is concerned about it, so let them worry about it. And we
yeah.
don't
I
have
mean,
to.
they're going to solve it very soon. It
Yeah,
doesn't affect me yet. It's going to be interesting to see where it goes. And I love that you made the point of those who are starting their creative career, those who are trying to figure out their path. Don't be scared of that. Continue on with what you're trying to create. This is just a tool. It's not going to take jobs away. It's going to improve jobs. Anyone who knows how to use it is going to have a job. Anyone who does not is most likely going to be left behind or at a disadvantage.
yeah,
And there's a lot to say there. And
yeah. So I think we kind of got stuck on AI, and I totally didn't answer your inspiration question. So
oh, yes, I'll reiterate those inspiration questions. So this is something students that I work with and people that just kind of ask me, hey, how do you get inspired? For you, how do you get inspired? How do you get into a project? Even better, after you talk about that, share with us some of your inspirations, like what artists inspire you, what designers inspire you, and we'll go from there.
okay, yeah. I'm inspired by a lot of different things, I guess. Like everything from, just sometimes going to an art museum and seeing just actual paintings and artwork that oftentimes inspires me. I'm inspired by nature. Like, I'll never forget one day I was living in Oregon and I was just driving. I think I was driving to work, and the sun was hitting like this massive mountain full of big pine trees a certain way, and it made it look like a chevron pattern. And at the time, I was working on a project at an agency I was at, and I was like, oh, I've been trying to come up with this pattern that was gonna translate across this project, and like, there it is. And so that day I was inspired by trees and the way that the light was the light was hitting them, it made it look like a chevron pattern all the way up the mountain. And it was incredible. And I was like, oh, that's it right there. That's exactly what I need to make. So
That's amazing.
I mean, yeah, I'm inspired. Yeah, if I'm inspired by a lot of design blogs, right? Like a lot of different designers online nowadays. Instagram, right? There's you could come across tons of inspiration there. Um, yeah, I often find design inspiration outside design though, like the tree example. Sometimes like cars, the way cars are proportioned or designed, it's like, oh, like that could be something. Um, and then just yeah, I don't yeah, I guess that's it. That's kind of my inspirations: nature, objects, and paintings.
Oh, that's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Is there any specific designer or artist that still inspires you or even inspired you as a youth? I know for me, once I discovered Aaron Draplin's work, my life was different. As far as being a designer, I still love his work. And uh, for me, Chuck Jones, the director, the animator of Looney Tunes back in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, the man who created such a unique style, character-wise and illustratively, he changed the way we looked at Looney Tunes characters, gave them a different personality, made it so their character design was used for almost 60 years. I mean, a very unique situation, but these people inspired me both in design, use of color, use of story, visual story in this case. Is there any artist that stands out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you there on Draplin. I think he's really cool. He's another guy that puts a lot of thought behind his designs, and just like watching him work. Like I think if you go on YouTube and you like Google his name or search his name, there's like some shorts videos where he kind of goes through how quickly his brain works on like just like how he gets from like nothing on the artboard to like a finished logo like really fast, and just iterates and iterates and iterates, and then changes this, changes that. Like, okay, save this one because I kind of like it, but I'm gonna dupe it and do something else over here. And I'm like, man, this guy's brain is just like firing. Like it's no creative block, right? He's just, and then it's like cool. Like he's just playing, he's just having fun, and then he ends up with something really freaking cool. And it's he's not putting pressure on himself to strike gold at the first strike, right? He understands that it's going to take time. He understands that there's a process, and he understands that even when he comes to something that he really likes, he may not be done, and he'll save it, he'll duplicate it, and then he'll keep going. And then oftentimes he'll find something that he liked even more, and it's like, wow, if he would have stopped, 5 versions ago, he would have never got to that one that he ultimately liked. And then sometimes he goes on and on and on, and then he goes back to like the one that he liked at the beginning. And that's just the game you play, I guess. But yeah, I like him a lot. um Jessica Walsh, I think, is really cool. I think she was like the number one ranked designer by some design publication this year.
Yeah.
uh her work, or her company's work, and Walsh, is really cool. They're also really creative, and a lot good narratives behind the work. Uh, Alan Peters on Instagram, that guy's crushing it. Like
Oh,
his,
absolutely.
yeah, that dude's really cool. Like sometimes he's a good example of like I'll see a design that he does, and I'm like, I don't really like it. But then he goes through the explanation of why he made certain decisions and why this looks like that. And I'm like, oh wow, like that's really cool. So I go from like I'm not really feeling it to I love it, right? And it's all because of the process and how he explains his work and why he did this, why he did that, why he cut that. So yeah, those are, and then I guess Mark Parker has always been like a big inspiration to me. A lot of people don't know he was a designer at Nike, and then just climbed the corporate ladder all the way to CEO. And I think to me that's super inspiring because it shows that designers can be more than designers, and they could be businessmen, and they could, or business people. Um, they can think outside of just creativity, right? They can't be business minded, they can't be analytical, and they can be smart, for lack of a better term. I think a lot of times designers kind of get put in a corner of like you're just a designer, right? We get this like kind of what could be perceived as like a negative connotation of like, you smoke weed and draw,
Oh,
like, like,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's not everyone, right? That's not all designers, and maybe some, but that's not all. And I think Mark Parker is a good example of like you could be a designer and you could also be a CEO.
Oh yeah, it's interesting how we get pigeonholed as creatives into go to the drawing desk and keep your head down. That has happened at a couple of places I've worked where they believed we were set marketing, they believed we were separate from the decision-making process, and I think it's just the opposite. It is completely collaborative, and many designers have a head for business. Many designers have a head for marketing. It's not just we give you the idea, please go create it. It's we're in deep on the marketing end. We're in deep on the business end often when we're especially freelancers like you and I, when we run our own businesses, we have to do a little of everything and we have to understand how the ramifications of this decision will affect the business, affect the marketing for a client or for ourselves. So it's going to be very interesting to translate that over to uh, other aspects of our lives, and we can often be pigeonholed. And just in general, you're a great example. You're still a creative director, creative manager with the brand management and everything that you do for Fanatics, but you still have your own business. You're still operating as a freelancer, and uh, you're probably working with slightly than what Fanatics would have. And you're still managing to be creative, manage activity with other people, collaborating with large groups of people. I'm sure you've had to put together photo shoots, marketing meetings, etc., all that great stuff. And you're translating that as a different skill from your normal creativity.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's really important for designers, especially young designers. It's like always be confident in how you present your work. Always present it, to the best of your abilities, and if possible, don't let anybody else present your work because they don't know what went into it. They're not going to present it the way that you're going to present it because you're the one that created it, right? Like that's important.
Oh, absolutely. And Anthony, I know we're running a little short on time for this. I want to thank you again so much for being here. And as we leave, do you have any words of advice for young artists looking to get into create the creative industry? I know we kind of asked this earlier, but any parting words, as we would say?
Yeah, well, no, I want to thank you for having me on here. And I guess my last words of advice is Um, I always kind of go back to this quote, and I'll explain the quote that's not going to make any sense, but then I'll make it make sense after. But it's this quote of like, um, don't forget that washing the sink is part of washing the dishes. And I think it goes to, or I know it correlates to, do a little more, right? Do a little more sometimes than what the project calls for. Do a little more than the bare minimum. Do a little more than the dishes, right? Wash the sink. If going back to my interview process at Fanatics at the time, there was a test project, and I don't know if they do companies even still do test projects. I don't know, but
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
um, that's an opportunity right there where wash the sink, wink wink, and do a little bit more, right? Like I recall my test project with Fanatics. I had to design, it was for t-shirt graphics, the role, right? So I had to design some t-shirt graphics, and there was like three graphics I had to do one for like University of Florida, one for Florida State, and then one matchup tee that had to incorporate both teams. And I not only did I do the graphics, I had kind of inspiration pages and explanation pages. I did a whole presentation ahead of each design. Then I mocked them up on t-shirts, mocked them up on hoodies. And I kind of did a little bit more than what the brief called for. And I know that was also another like piece that separated my overall interview process because they later told me like, wow, like we really liked your presentation. And some people, believe it or not, they just did the graphics and sent them in a PDF, and it was just 3 pages of just the graphics with no storytelling, no mock-ups, no nothing. So do a little bit more. It's always worth going the extra mile. Don't let nobody tell you not to. And if you'll never get the job you want if you just sit there and wait for someone to hand it to you. You almost got to do the job before it's yours and show them that it is yours. Take it, right? Don't let them give it to you. You go take it. And I think that's my that's my final piece of advice.
Absolutely appreciate it, man. Again, it's great to see you. It's been a while since we talked, and for me, it's always a joy to talk with you because you always have something interesting going on. You've always been a designer that inspires me. That's why I enjoyed working with you in college on collaborating on projects. And I will never forget when you got that phone call. I remember you marching out of class nervous, which you had nothing to be nervous about. The minute you picked up that phone, you were a different person. And I remember seeing you through the doors because I was walking out to get some papers or something, and you were taking that phone call saying, "Hey, we want to interview you." And you're gonna fly out to to Florida. I remember that we were on the second or third floor of the friggin' art building at Cal State San Bernardino, and I remember you coming back in, and you're like, "It looks like I'm going to Florida in a couple of days." And mind you, I don't remember all the words. I didn't listen to your conversation. I just remember the look on your face, ghost white to suddenly color, and I have this. It's not a problem. Thank you so much. And then you just told us what happened. It was kind of a cool moment, and I appreciate that I was there for it. You've always been an inspiration for me, and I again appreciate you being here and look forward to talking to you soon, man.
Thanks, man. Right back at you. And I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, I mean, you've I love that I'm able to inspire you because you're also able to inspire me. And I think that's what it's all about, right? It's finding inspiration in others and just keeping it pushing.
Absolutely, man. Thank you so much, and you take care, Anthony.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.